folks, it's been about 1 year since Joe Biden became president of the United States. And in this video, I want to take you through some terrifying stuff in the stock market right now since Joe Biden has become president. Now, two things I want to cover right off the top here in this video, all right, is I am not making this video to portray Joe Biden in a negative light or to, crap all over him or say how bad he is or things like that. I'm just going to give you the facts. I'm going to show you the data and what's going on in the stock market, over the past year since he became president. I never made fun of Trump. I never made fun of Obama. I'm not that type of person, and that's not the type of channel I have. That's not the type of content I create. If you want a video just, crapping all over Joe Biden and making fun of him and those sorts of things, there's a million videos out there for you to watch out there, no different than when Trump was president. There was a ton of people that made fun of him and those sorts of things. I am just here to show you the data and show you what's going on. Like I said, we're going to get into some pretty terrifying charts in this video on what's going on in the stock market right now and since he became president. Second thing I just want to discuss here at the top that I think needs to be said is presidents of the United States, in my opinion, they get way too much credit when the stock market does great and way too much blame if the stock market does bad. They're just one component of this. They are not the pure driver of the stock market. There's so many various things that go into this that's way beyond the president's control. And it reminds me, if you watch football, I don't know how many of you guys watch football out there, but if you watch, football, essentially the quarterback of the team gets all the blame if a team does really bad in a game and they lose a game, right? And they get all the praise when the team wins, when literally there's so many other people that go into this. It's not like the quarterback can win the game by himself, right? You need the linemen to block, you need the receivers to catch the ball, you need the running backs to run the ball, you need the kicker to kick the ball through the upright, right? You need the defense to play good, you need the coaching staff to call the right plays. You need so much for this whole thing to work. But yet the quarterback gets so much of the blame or so much of the praise. In a very similar situation in the stock market, and in the United States in general, where if the stock market does great, the president gets so much credit for that. And if the stock market does bad, the president gets so much blame for that, when really there's just one component in a whole bunch of stuff, okay? So anyways, hope you guys enjoy this video. As always, hope you get some good value out of it. And also let me know how, your opinion of how Joe Biden's stock market has done in his first year of being president. Also, make sure to subscribe to the channel if you're not already. And if you want 5 free stocks from Moomoo valued up to $3,500 each, check out pinned comment down there. Alrighty, guys, so let's get into this. First thing we got to discuss right here at the top, this is extremely important, is you can't, a president can't choose what type of stock market they inherit, right? They could inherit a healthy stock market, a bad stock market. If we go back to the last couple presidents, for instance, right? Obama inherited a stock market that was in full crash mode, right? The U.S. economy was in a crash at that time. Jobs were being lost en masse. And things started to stabilize a couple of months after he became president. We kind of bottomed out it was around March of 2009, and then we started going up from there. And over those 8 years that Obama was president, the S&P 500 went from about 1,000 to about 2,500 over those eight years, okay? So a lot of folks would say that's pretty good, a pretty good track record there. As far as Trump, he was only in office for 4 years. Keep this in mind. And when he took office, the S&P was around 2.5K or so, roughly. When he left office, the S&P 500 was around 4K-ish, okay? So he had about the same amount of point rise, but keep in mind this is a bigger percentage rise, but also keep in mind Obama was in for 8 years, whereas Trump was only in for 4 years. So we'll never know how the stock market would have done if Trump was in for a full, 8 years, let's say, for instance, right? Also very important to keep in mind is, the percentages. Like I said, the percentages are very key in this whole game, okay? Now, since Joe Biden has become president, once again, when he took office, the S&P 500 was around 4,000 roughly. And here today, the S&P 500 is around, 4,700-ish, somewhere around there roughly, all right? So nonetheless, the stock market is off to a good start if you just look at the S&P 500. Now, do keep in mind, the way the S&P 500 is ran is it's a very heavily weighted index toward the biggest companies. So this essentially means that the biggest companies are likely thriving, or at least seen as thriving by investors out there. And so folks have wanted to put money in those sorts of companies. And so the S&P 500 has done very well based upon, a lot of these big companies doing very, very well. We see a very similar trend with the NASDAQ 100, where the NASDAQ 100, when Biden came into office, was in the low 13,000 range. And here today, the NASDAQ's roughly around, 15,400 or so. So once again, a very, very healthy NASDAQ. Now, once again, the NASDAQ 100 is weighted toward the biggest of the big companies, and the biggest of the big companies have seemed to have thrived under Joe Biden's presidency so far in the first year. Keep in mind, this is the first year. There's still obviously 3 more years to play out here as far as this goes. Now, what we're going to see on the next slide is, I would say pretty darn shocking, right? Look at this. The Russell 2000 has gone down. This is amazing, right? Since around the time Biden came in, it's down. That's extraordinary when you see how strong the NASDAQ's been since Biden took office, and when you see how strong the S&P 500's been since Joe Biden took office, and when you look at the Dow 30, how strong the Dow 30's been since Joe Biden took office. You would assume the Russell would be right there in with those indexes, if not even better, because a lot of times the Russell can outperform the markets to the upsides or the downside. In a tough market, sometimes the Russell can, basically underperform, and in a great market, a lot of times the Russell can outperform. And here we are, where the Russell is down. That's simply almost shocking. And there is a, you could say these things are myths or they're truths or whatever, but there's a thought that under a Republican, let's call it administration, smaller businesses and smaller companies do well, right? And there's a thought, whether this is false or true, it's just a thought that folks feel like if, it's a Democratic administration, large companies do better. And the biggest of the bigs thrive and smaller companies go down, right? Now, that can be truth or that can be perception. That's really up for you to decide as far as that goes. But nonetheless, you can see this playing out in real time where the smalls have gotten just decimated in this whole situation. Also, another big part of that could be inflation. Inflation, a lot of that also comes from supply chains being messed up. So let's do keep that in mind as well. On top of obviously the Fed pump of money out there from basically 2020, which was before obviously even Biden took office. So these are all kind of factors you got to take into account here. But nonetheless, the Russell has gone down. Isn't that tremendous, right? That's just unbelievable, especially when you take into account like how healthy the NASDAQ has looked and how healthy the S&P 500 has looked. And keep in mind, even the Russell 2000 index, right, which is a lot of the smaller companies, that's even heavily weighted toward the biggest of those Russell stocks, which have held up pretty darn good. There's a lot of stocks in the Russell that are over a $5 billion market cap, and those ones have held up pretty strong, which have helped the index look better than it's really been. So if it wasn't for those stocks, I wouldn't be surprised if the Russell 2000 was under 2,000 right now. It was at an 1,800 to 1,900 level if it wasn't for the fact that the biggest of the bigs have, once again, kind of held everything up. That's quite terrifying. This is even more terrifying. This is from December. It's gotten a lot worse than this since then, essentially, right? The NASDAQ, the average stock in the NASDAQ, as far as the distance from 52-week high, 39.1%. And like I said, this was back in December, and it's gotten a lot worse since then. As far as the small cap 600, down 22% from 52-week high, the average stock distance. And once again, it's gotten worse since then. Okay, so this is something that's just extraordinary to look at and see like how many of these companies have really been in a bear market. And something we discussed in a video I did on my main channel last night. Late last night, I released a video, a very important video, and we went into a bunch of data and things looking at that. And something we found in that video was over 2/3 of NASDAQ stocks are basically in a bear market right now. Think about that for a moment. Over 2/3, over 67% of NASDAQ stocks are in a bear market. Now, you don't think we're in a bear market because you see the index and it's like, oh, it doesn't look that bad. And then when you go a little beneath the surface, you find, oh my gosh, it's kind of like a tip of the iceberg type thing. And you find, oh my gosh, like all these stocks have just eroded. Their, 60, 70% of these stocks are down 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70%. It's been tremendous, the falls these stocks have gone on, and not really anybody's really noticed it for the most part, unless you're really, really into the market and you've invested into a lot of stocks, right? This, my gosh, okay? You want to talk about something that is seen as shocking. So if you think about a Democratic administration, there's a thought that Democratic administrations would be bad for oil and gas companies, bad for oil and gas stocks. They would underperform. They would do bad. That's a thought, right? And once again, there's many thoughts in the market that sometimes don't come true. And what we see is, look where ExxonMobil was when Joe Biden took office. It was around $47 roughly. And here today, where is it? $70. ExxonMobil, XOM's done tremendous in the first year since Joe Biden took office. And that's just one of those things, once again, like it is a thought that, under a Republican, oil and gas would do good. And under a Democrat, these stocks would do bad. And what we see clearly in ExxonMobil is just a complete opposite. But you can say, well, maybe that's just a one-off. Maybe it's just ExxonMobil. No, if you go throughout actually most oil and gas companies, almost all of them have performed really dang good. Look at Chevron, CVX. This stock was roughly $90 or so when Joe Biden took office. It's 120 plus now, 1 year later. So think about that for a moment. This is just something you would never think. You would think, well, Democratic administrations, it would be the clean energy. That would do well. Oil and gas, horrible. And no, that's just not how it's been so far, right? Once again, you can blame these things or not blame these things on a president, but it's very, very interesting to kind of see this play out. Now, cannabis. This is an industry you would have thought would be doing tremendous with a Democratic administration coming in. And what we find is just, it has not been good. A stock like I'm very invested in Planet 13. This one, was roughly $5 and, $5.50 or so when Biden took office. And here today, it's $3.28 roughly. And this is an industry that is, federal legalization is going to be key. But if we don't get the federal legalization, it makes the industry tougher. And keep this in mind. When I'm showing you Planet 13 here, this is one of the softer landings for one of these stocks in this industry. I mean, I've seen a lot of stocks go down since late January, about, 50, 60, 70, 80% plus in this industry. The Planet going from 550 to 320 is actually a pretty lame fall compared to most of the stocks in this industry have just fallen off a cliff. This one's like fallen, but it's not nearly as bad as some stocks. And so that's something to keep in mind there. Once again, just one of those things that these stocks should do good under this administration. No, they're actually not doing well, at least so far. Another shocking thing, look at this. So once again, the thought process is Democratic administration, electric vehicles would do well in that sort of environment. What about a company that has less than 1% of their revenue from electric vehicles and almost all their revenue comes from internal combustion engines? Well, look at that company, a Ford Motor Company, from $11 a share to here today, $24 a share. Who would have thought it? Like if you pull up Tesla versus Ford since Joe Biden took office, you would assume Tesla must massively outperform Ford, when in reality Ford has massively outperformed Tesla during the same exact time since Joe Biden took office. And that's just extraordinary, because you literally, if you're just paying attention to kind of what the trends are and what is supposed to happen, that's not supposed to happen. And yet it has happened here, okay? So that's just something that's pretty darn shocking. Now, corporate tax rates is important to talk about, because corporate tax rates got cut under the Trump administration from basically before they were about 35%, they got cut to 21%. Now, there's been a lot of worries about, could Biden and this administration raise corporate taxes to 28% or something like that? Maybe not back up to 35%, but to 28%. And in my opinion, looking at this, I think it's very, very unrealistic that something like that plays out. And the reason being is, you got to understand, once again, whether it's right or wrong, the way folks look at this is if the stock market's doing well under a president, then they're much more likely to vote that president in again, right? Now, if corporate taxes go up, that's another holdback of the stock market, which means there's a higher probability the stock market does bad over the second year as being president and the third year, which means going into that last year when it comes vote time, right? If the stock market's not performing well and it hasn't done well under your presidency, a lot of folks just look at that as hey, that's a sign that you haven't done what's good for the economy, right? Now, once again, whether that's right or wrong, that's just the way people's perceptions are. And so I don't think Joe Biden wants to risk the stock market going down or downtrending in his second and third year, going into the last year where all of a sudden it is vote time, because like I said, if the stock market's in a bad place, there's a high probability that he would be booted out in that scenario. So I think there's a really low probability that corporate taxes go up in any way. Let's just call it that, anytime soon, guys. But I would love to know your guys' opinion in that comment section. Let me know how you think Joe Biden's stock market has done so far. Are you happy with things? Are you not happy with things? We'd love to hear from you guys as always. Much love. Get those free stocks from Mumu. That'll be pinned comment down there, and have a great day.